So, recently on Twitter, you opened a discussion about mental health and how players are treated and perceived by the fan base. And I wanted to ask you what made you make that tweet in the first place.
I don't think there was a specific reason for it. It's just an overall observation. I guess like recently it's been all about like kind of addressing certain things that have been like under the radar for a long while. So I felt like maybe it was now the right time to kind of address it, especially having a bit of time being a coach too. So seeing the other side, seeing the staff side of like the potential mental health problems that could exist within esports, and I think that was just, I mean, it just felt like the right time to do it.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning of your career. When did you first realize that maybe the road to you would be a little bit different than the usual person when it comes to dealing with criticism online or facing the public in general?
I mean, I think I was never someone that really liked social media. Even when I was starting my career, I didn't use social media until basically 2014. I was kind of forced to by the organizations that I was working with. So Copenhagen Maurice and TSM, especially when I had to use my Twitter. And I think the first time I actually felt like there was any kind of like backlash against me as a person was actually something I caught on TSM, mainly due to something inside at the time. So you basically had a kind of like a cloud that was more or less established by further established like esports journalists as in Monte Cristo and Thorin at the time, which I'm actually like completely fine with these days. So it's kind of coincidental. But at the time, like they were really popular with the Summoning Inside show, and a lot of people took whatever they said as gospel. And especially me as a new player with an NA, me as a player that was like then not performing or not filling the shoes of the other one, was basically an easy target at the time. So I definitely felt a lot of the criticism, and I think due to the fact that I had to establish a social media presence while also have to face the criticism was pretty weird to me and new to me. So I couldn't quite put that in, like, let's put it this way, like oftentimes I could just not put it into my frame of mind, I guess, into what I usually like focus on or what I usually face on a daily basis. That whole thing was completely new to me. So it kind of, yeah, I guess almost attacked my way of thinking and my way of acting every single day, because I did have to take into account other things that I didn't take into account beforehand. And it was slightly overwhelming to me, especially criticism coming into that extent and to that harshness, to be fair.
What did it do to you?
I mean, what it did to me is basically like just make me a bit more cynical, I guess, about certain things. So I try to basically distance myself by being a bit more cynical, being more aggressive, maybe even someone that was more vengeful instead of actually being an enjoyable person, which I think I usually was or still am to a certain extent.
You're an enjoyable
That like,
person.
yeah, to a certain extent, that someone is like someone that can basically like take some time off of esports, like get his mind straight and basically just like enjoy being in the competition instead of actually seeing it as something where I had to continuously prove myself. And I think that's what it did to me. I think it kind of established that frame of mind where, hey, I have all these people that were going after me that are like negative towards me. I need to prove them wrong every single day. And that chip on my shoulder like defined me for a long time coming. And I think I only really dropped it in 2016 when I finally felt like, hey, I'm the best jungler in the West or whatever it is, because I was also the All-Star in 2015. So I felt like I was the best jungler in the West and I didn't have to care about it anymore. And I finally proved everyone wrong, only for that to be dropped once I basically encountered some of the issues with Origin, and then later on with Fnatic, that like suddenly I had to prove again who I was, how good I am, whatever it is, and the critics were loud and clear again, which always happens whenever apparently I'm down. So like that made me a vengeful person, made me an aggressive person, made me a honestly despicable human to a certain extent. And I think that's not something I aspire to be at all. And I think online criticism is going really far because you don't quite deal with it, especially voices on online, don't quite deal with it as if it was strangers, but rather like people actually speaking to you.
Right.
So when you see someone's Twitter profile popping up and he's criticizing you, you're not like, oh, this guy is just a Twitter profile, this guy is just random. Or you may be able to do it in the beginning, you may be able to do it once, twice, 3 times, 10 times. But if people slide into your DMs and are like, you're terrible, you're disgusting, whatever it is, kill yourself, these kind of things, like at that point you kind of don't deal with it anymore in a way that is actually like a stranger talking to you, but it actually becomes really personal, and that's when it afflicts you.
Do you think that these people that are talking to you take in consideration what they're saying? Or why do you even think that they go out of their way to attack you? Because to me, it feels like they take what players do a lot more seriously than they should sometimes. And I wanted to hear from you as a player what your thoughts are.
I think the anonymity of the internet kind of allows people to be a bit more disgusting or despicable than they usually are.
Right.
I do think that they do take like actions a lot more serious of pro players because, and that's gonna sound kind of cocky, but it's also probably the truth. I think a lot of people do think that they could be in the place of the pro players, especially up and coming like players that are basically Diamond 1 that kind of think they know how to play the game, but they're not quite there yet, or like Diamond 4 players, these kind of things. They think that the game is so easy that they could actually be in the place of the pro players. Thus, every mistake a pro player makes is something that they could have avoided. So basically, their superiority complex makes it so that they assume that they're just better than you. So that in itself makes them like criticize you a lot more harshly because in their eyes they obviously could have done better. Furthermore, there's a lot of jealousy. There's a lot of like, and there's also, and that's like maybe the other side, like a lot of like. I would say that the internet and especially vocal and verbal, like vocal social media, or vocal vocal minority in the social media, may also just have to deal with certain issues themselves. So like certain,
Totally.
yeah. So I think that may exacerbate the issues because then they feel like they have like a vessel to let off some steam, and it's
Right.
kind of like a football fan screaming at the TV and being like, hey, why do you miss that shot? You're so bad. But they take it up to another level, which is basically like the social media instance, because the connection between players and fans is so narrow and so like, I mean, there's basically no barrier between them anymore because of social media, that they take it up with the people themselves. So it's kind of like a hooligan at a football game.
Yeah.
Like, so it's basically the same thing. So I think that's what's kind of like maybe driving it too.
Okay, and now it seems to me that you have obviously a completely different mindset about the whole situation. When do you think that was the tipping point for you to actually start addressing these matters on social media and start calling fans out and advocating for players instead?
Because I see what it does with my players. I see what it does with DOS. I think DOS has been someone that has been heavily criticized ever since we decided to change him up for Danik, even though that decision wasn't on him. It wasn't his decision. If they want to come for someone, they can come for me or Handro. They're not going to come for him. And I think when I see this guy like avoiding social media or trying to like basically not read certain comments, it puts fear in my soul because I've been in that situation. And I think the disgusting habits that certain people have in terms of attacking 19, 17, 18, 20-year-old people that have just like basically been released from home to a certain extent and then have been open to the world by moving to another country, by getting to play the game that they love, that they have loved for so many years, and suddenly they put it in a frame of mind where they may not enjoy it as much anymore because of it. It actually makes me scared because it makes me sad too, because this shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be that the love for the game, especially for a game like League of Legends, is driven away from people because of social media. And I think that's what's happening a lot of the times for a lot of people. That's why you don't see like that's why I often see like certain people actually giving up on esports, because what's the point if everything that you do is being criticized to the point that you get death threats, or like not even death threats, or like basically people telling you to kill yourself. Like what is this? Like where's this coming from? And I think that's like what I just don't get. And when I see that with my players, like it makes me sad. When I see it with other players, obviously from other teams, I just want to address it, because I do think it's more than important that we as pro players, we as coaches, we as staffs in the competitive scene actually take a stance against it. And I think we allow ourselves to be vulnerable oftentimes because we run our social media most often. We're not rich enough to basically hire someone and be like, hey, dude, you want to run my social media? That's not going to happen. Like, it's not going to be someone, especially a rookie, is not going to do that because they don't have the money for it. So they're going to be interacting on a really personal level with the fans. And I think that is being abused as well. It's used by a lot of people like in a well-meaning manner too. So it's not like just negative, but obviously there's like a rule, I think in psychology, which is basically a 1 to 10 rule. For every 10 good comment. Like for every one negative comment, you need to read 10 good comments, or you need to have like 10 good things happen to you. You know, so for because you will remember the one negative more so than like 9 negative or 8 negative on average, 8 positive on average. So that 10-1 ratio has to come in, and I think in terms of doubt, in terms of like basically performing bad, that ratio is not 1:10. That ratio is definitely like 3-5, 3-3, whatever it is. Like it's based, or 1-1, whatever it is. You know, so the ratio is good.
Okay, and what do you think that organizations can do to protect their players?
I mean, one of them would be to allow people to have their social media run. Like Misfits is doing it partially, but they allow like certain if you want to have your social media run by the organization, they will do that. So that'd be one thing. But I think second off, like just protecting the players. Like I think that's what it needs to have, because like I think non-action is worse. I mean, non-action is the worst thing you can do in these kind of situations, because the things that the Hiveman has already been established for a lot of players. So, for example, let's take any kind of popular streamer. You know, like any kind of popular streamer who has an active cloud, who has an active like Twitch community, whatever it is gonna say, "Oh, this guy is terrible." So that suddenly becomes gospel. So when this becomes gospel, they then attack people that may not have the same kind of active following. So you need to push against it. So every time like this push is coming in, this negative push, you need to push back in a positive kind of manner and take people into like almost like you know, like shelter them a bit. You know, and as dumb as it sounds, like we don't want to make a world where no one can be hurt or what it is. But I think when people are hurt, we need to pick them back up, and I think that's what we have to establish, because we can't avoid people getting hurt. We can't avoid people getting insulted. Like that would go going too far, and I think that we'll never be able to establish, because it will always be achieved on a personal level. But what we can do is like pick people up when they're down, when they're in situations where they can be attacked, where they are vulnerable, and I think that's what counts.
And what are you doing as a coach to assist your players? You're passing down the knowledge that you've had over all these years on how to do criticism and whatnot?
Yeah, of course. Like I do that, and in situations where I feel like that the Hiveman is going too far into a certain direction, I try to basically address it. And I think, like I mean, I kind of do what I wish people would have done for me as a player. I think that's like what I guess I'm trying to achieve, and I think that's always been my goal, that I try to do better than what other people did for me, and I basically try to fill that gap to a certain extent. So as a player, I would have liked for other people to step up for me, and I think every time someone was under heavy criticism in my teams, at least online, I've been really, really adamant about supporting them and trying to help them out, like in some kind of way, whether it was Dyrus, whether it was like even someone like Soros, whether it was like just like people that I knew were vulnerable to this kind of criticism, I try to stand up for them. And I think oftentimes that was not like really, I mean, I guess like it was not reciprocated. So I think that was kind of my issue as a player, and I wish it was. So I think now I'm doing that basically to do better and hold up my promises. You know.
Back when you started, esports psychologists were not as frequently seen in teams. The scene was still very new, and teams, I feel like either they didn't have the funding or they didn't have the knowledge on how to actually make, you know, a safe environment for players. What do you think that this you know, more frequent presence of esports psychologists is doing to the scene and to the players in general?
It can go both ways, so it depends on the person entirely that is hired. So I think some esports psychologists that I've worked with are more on the performance side of things, so that means they're basically trying to improve performance, but they're not addressing the psychology side, whereas others have been on that psychology side more, and have been trying less about improving the player's mental health, like about the player's performance. So I think it entirely depends on that. For me as a person, maybe because I guess I'm slightly more vulnerable because of the way that I act, I guess, because I think I'm a really open person in terms of what I show, what I give to other people, and what I broadcast honestly to the world, I guess. That I think I'm more of someone that can take off himself, like in terms of the performance issues that I have, but I can't take care of myself in terms of the psychology issues I have, because like in certain things, like it just runs past me and I don't quite realize it in the moment. So I'm happy that the psychology side of things has especially picked up. I'm like, when I was a player, I have to commend, like especially in the later years, like because in later years I guess I struggled more with the whole like I have to perform and I have to beat everyone, and like I have so many people doubting me, whatever it is, that I was really happy about having like two sports psychologists that I worked with that were really helpful to me, because Fabian Broich, has been a popular figure recently, especially in Dark Gardener when I was a player, like in one of these, like I talked to them about stuff that I couldn't talk to my teammates about, or I couldn't talk to the staff about, like the rest of the staff, because it was mostly psychological issues that I was dealing with throughout my career. And I think that avenue being opened up is so important for so many people, because the vulnerability of, like, okay, being vulnerable is actually, in my opinion, oftentimes a lot. I mean, I also don't want to hurt myself and paint myself as like a triumph victor, or like someone that's like a god amongst men, whatever it is, you know. And I don't want to sound delusional with this, but I think being vulnerable, or showing a vulnerable state, is probably the thing that is the scariest to do. But when you're actually okay with being vulnerable, I think that allows you to be strong in every single moment, because at that point you're basically opening yourself up to everything that could happen to you, and then you build yourself up stronger from that. So I think that whole action of mine, like that I've been trying to pursue throughout my career, or even throughout my life, has been something that like some people have taken advantage of, but oftentimes it's also granted me connections to people that have allowed me to transcend like normal human interactions, that have allowed me to build friendships and teammateships that, like, maybe on a normal scale I would not have been able to achieve. So those people have really helped me in those situations where I was in those vulnerable states. So I think I'm not this only one, but I think a lot of players nowadays are scared to be open. They're scared to be vulnerable. And I don't think that should be the case.
All right. Thank you so much, Maurice, for your insight. I hope
No
you guys
worries.
have a wonderful split.
Thank you.
Bye.